Welcome to Coming Home, Survive and Thrive in Homeschooling. The birds and the bees. One of the myths about homeschooling is that your children need to live in the real world. The person spouting that piece of non-thinking assumption needs to be asked to define what real is, if you can be bothered, that is. It's more likely to be an ill-delivered defence for their own choices than a genuine attempt to begin a conversation. It's fair to say the chat won't go any further than your calm response of asking for the definition. When it comes to what passes as sex education in the schools, and yes, preschools, I would suggest that what their children are exposed to, no pun intended, is what is not real. I was thinking of doing this podcast a couple of weeks ago, but I admit to chickening out. Since then, other conservative podcasters have spoken freely this month, and I felt a tad convicted. I don't like confrontation, but when one is a contrarian, it makes it inevitable sometimes. Sex education in earlier times was probably a part of everyday life. After all, animals mating and their young born in the spring would have been familiar to most. Fertility cycles were known to women for millennia until modern birth control made us forget. So what to do? Well, use the right words as well as slang terms. It took me a while to learn to use the correct words for some body parts because I had absorbed the attitude of right and wrong about it as a child. Warn them of what to be careful of, keeping secrets, threats to harm their family if they tell. Teach them to trust their instincts when it feels wrong to be alone with someone so they can recall what you have told them as well as that caution which is arising in them. When I was a girl, my mother told me about an example of when she was young. She and a friend were out playing and a man they didn't know approached them and asked for help to look for his lost puppy. So of course they would go to help look for a lost puppy. When they were out of sight, the man said to them, "All I want you to do is lift up your dresses and pull down your pants." My mother's friend said, "I'll scream," and the man said, "Go on then." She did. Fortunately, he took off. I think it's okay to tell your children stories like this. You're not doing it from the motivation of frightening them, but where it's applicable, you need to give them examples of possibilities that might happen. Most people are good and kind, but occasionally there will be people in their lives who don't mean well. So if you have your own examples of this, or you know anecdotally, like I had of my mother telling me this story, you can use these to help your children build an awareness of the world about them. You can answer questions as they arise naturally from your children, as well as sit-down discussions that you plan for. It is a good idea to have books about the body in your house for them just to be able to pick up and read and learn and look at all the pictures and the diagrams and about the whole body, the heart, lungs, brain, all of the reproductive organs, blood, everything, so that your child is absorbing that the body is good and that they are learning things matter-of-factly and they can come and ask you about it, or you can use it as a way of maybe initiating a conversation if you can see that it's the right time. There are also books that have been well written for your child to help you introduce sex education to them. Why we need to teach them? Because they need to know from you, not someone else. It's all very well having the books for them, but it's not enough to just say, here are the books, assuming that that's going to be their education. They are a tool for you to use, and you need to use them along with taking the initiative and making the conversations with them. So the books and materials go together with your time with them. They need to know facts, not myths. They need to know just enough for their age. You are the best judge of that. If they're happy with a simple explanation, leave it there. That's all they need for now. If there are other questions, answer them, but stop when they're satisfied with your answers. Remember, they are young and their brains are not able to absorb everything there is to know. Bear in mind that there is the age of concrete thinking versus abstract thinking. Concrete thinking happens around 9, 10 years and younger, maybe up to age 12. After then, there is more abstract thinking. So you can see that when they are in their concrete thinking years, they just need to know some basics. Once they enter into those abstract thinking years where they're able to think through and start to analyze for themselves, then you can move into the more nuanced sex education. I know it's embarrassing and you'd rather not, but this is not about you. It's their minds and hearts at stake here. You're going to have to buckle up, choose to overcome your own awkwardness, and have conversations. Plural. It's not one chat, tick the box, and it's done. There are going to be more. Neither do you want to be too casual, like it's just like taking your in-heat bitch to be mated. The dogs are animals. We are humans. Don't assume because you homeschool your child will not come across what school children are talking about and being taught. Ask them what they are hearing and then start a conversation. Don't get mad or surprised. Just be matter of fact about it. If you need to find information, do that and get back to them as soon as possible. Your children need to know there's a spiritual side to sex. It's not just sex, it's sacred as well as practical. If you are Christian, you know the church is referred to as the bride of Christ and he the bridegroom. It's a time of joy. Becoming one with your spouse is an earthly example of becoming one with Christ when he returns for his church. This concept is tricky for young children, but your older children should understand that. So what was sex education like for me when I was a child? I think I was about 8 or 9 when my mother first told me. I wanted to go to the city with a friend by ourselves, and I was upset my mother wouldn't let me when my friend's mother would. So she decided that that was the time I needed to be given the facts of life, as they used to be called then. And I remember being genuinely surprised at the nitty-gritty of what she told me. Looking back, I know I was slightly too young for that because I remember thinking that it was a bit odd. But she responded in the best way that she could. They were worried, my mum and dad, that going into the city, Auckland City for goodness sake, 2 young girls, innocent, not knowing anything, and just knowing what kind of unsavoury men that could be preying on young girls. That's what they were concerned about. So that was the moment when I was sat down and given the talk. My husband and most other boys out there have stories of magazines being shared in the bike sheds at school. Nowadays, porn is readily available on their phones, and it's not unusual to hear of teens entering into unrealistic relationships based on the porn they've been watching, thinking it's normal. What we did, my husband and I, and what we would change. Well, because of my experience early on when I was a child, my attitude swung the other way, and I thought, I'm going to wait till my children are ready and they'll ask me the questions, and that means they're ready. But sometimes the questions just didn't show up, and I can remember thinking, well, do I keep waiting? Do I sit them down and have this talk? And looking back for me, I should have done that deliberately I know I was shaped by what my experience was, and I thought I was doing the right thing. Hindsight is so clear. My husband, on the other hand, took our 2 boys individually at the right age and went out and had a talk with them. And that's the way I should have done it too. What's going on in the schools for sex education? Once again, I went to my chat group to find out what's happening in preschools right through the schools. One of the girls recalled about 20 years ago the childcare training included weird questions, she said, such as, how would you promote a lesbian relationship if you saw it happening? And when she says childcare training, I thought this might be preschool, and I'm wondering, what do children as preschoolers know about lesbian relationships? Another mum told me that preschools, just this last week, that's the middle of June 2022, some classic books are being cancelled. Bob McCroskey from Family First New Zealand told of the preschool book The Very Hungry Caterpillar, Eric Carle's classic book, was cancelled because it wasn't inclusive enough of cultural foods. And once these classics are being cancelled, they're being replaced with ones of another agenda. For instance, My 2 Dads are an early reader. She's also heard of trans-run preschool library sessions. One of the justifications I saw in an exchange between the mothers who were for and against this was that it was like a drama, and of course it's not sexualizing the children. Sure, if as a parent you need to believe that in order to make that a normal thing to take your children, very young, along to watch a drag queen read books to you, fine, that's what you can believe as an adult. But if that same parent wouldn't be happy with a real-life example of sex education being read to their children in a library session, why is it normal for a drag queen to do that? And how come one is sexualizing your child and one isn't? It just used to be normal, common knowledge that young children weren't ready for this kind of thing. It feels like very quickly a cultural shift has happened. I used to think that if we just ignored these shrill voices undermining our culture, they'd just go away. But they didn't, and they won't. Our silence and pretending they weren't there has only empowered them, and now there's more ground to recover. Modern sex education now must include the increasing cultural pressures that come with Pride Month. And I have a question. Why do we need a month? Anzac Day, Veteran Day, Memorial Day are for one day. Why do those who fought to give us a free life from fascism and, ironically, totalitarianism only get one day? Can we think about what they died for a month too? We might be better equipped to face these cultural shifts if we did. Casual sex and deviant sex has been soft-pedaled for decades and is now considered normal. What do you do if your child has been sexually involved or abused, watches porn regularly, or is rebelling and going down an all too familiar road? Your teens need to know there are consequences to all actions, including sexual ones. Some decisions our young ones make will have lifelong effects. As a parent talking to other parents, I suggest you be pragmatic, realistic, and compassionate. If they need a counsellor, choose well. You also need to learn about critical theory. Now please note that is not critical thinking. Critical theory is a completely different beast. I will include links in the description area about helpful books and podcasts where you can begin to come to understand what critical theory is. I want you to step back and try to see the bigger picture behind this push to sexualize and confuse our children. There's something much bigger and evil going on. If you can't see the deliberate attempts to break down Western culture to be replaced with some unknown, untried utopia, believe me, you need to see it so that you can prepare yourself and your family. There is no need to be fearful, as that leaves you vulnerable to those who are trying to control the change. But you do need to be afraid enough to want to face the information and help available to you to equip the minds and hearts of your children. Information is power. You must be prepared in advance to defend your children against the impact of radical policies and harmful ideologies. Think about where your business and purchases are going. If they support ideologies contrary to yours, or worse, wish harm on folks who believe the things you do, why are you spending your hard-earned money there? Unsubscribe and tell them why if you like. If you do, be polite and general, such as what I wrote to a company a couple of weeks ago. Adults make their own decisions. My objection is the political pressure on businesses to promote an agenda. I choose to buy from businesses trying to remain politically separate. Speak out and push back. One caveat. A famous person once said, "Speak the truth in love." That is, in this instance, firmly, clearly, without being rude, and stick to the facts. I hope this has been helpful to you. I know it's a serious subject. We never said, did we, that parenting was going to be easy? Much of your parenting is filled with joy. Some of your parenting are filled with challenges because you can see what the world is and your children can't. Embrace these challenges, and you and your children will be the better and the stronger for it. And when you and your children are stronger, the society around you will be stronger too. There is hope. People are speaking out and pushing back. If this podcast has been helpful to you, and I hope it has, please subscribe and share so that other homeschooling families like you can hear good parenting advice like this. That's it from me this week. I'll be back with you next week. Bye for now.